All right, I'm going to say something very controversial. I love Saturday Night Live. Put down your pitchforks, let me explain. I know there's always going to be a large subset of people that say SNL has never been funny, or the last time it was funny was 55 years ago, despite only being on the air for 50 years. But truly the best analogy I've ever seen for SNL was made by a small YouTuber named Drew Gooden. Now I'm paraphrasing here, but Drew basically said that watching SNL is like watching your favorite football team. Every week you cheer them on and hope they do good, but some weeks they don't. But there's always next week. It's honestly always been a dream of mine to attend a live taping of the show, despite me constantly losing the ticket lottery year after year. If someone from SNL or NBC is watching, please help. There's just something so fun about watching a live comedy show every week because you never know what's gonna happen. Something could go wrong, a famous celebrity could show up, or you could be witnessing the birth of the next big sketch. But one of the greatest joys of watching SNL each week is watching relatively unknown comedians become breakout stars. So many comedy legends that we know today started on SNL. Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, Will Ferrell, Eddie Murphy, the list goes on forever. But for every star that SNL creates, there are dozens of cast members that go relatively unnoticed, some of which don't even make it through a full season of the show. With SNL's 51st season cast shakeup going on as I'm filming this video, I wanted to take a moment to go back and view every single one-season cast member from SNL's 50-year history. Now, across the 51 seasons of SNL, there have been 172 cast members on the show. Of those 172 cast members, 56 of them only lasted a single season. That is a 32% turnover for first-year cast members, which is an insane number. This video is gonna be a doozy, so strap in. George Coe was part of the inaugural cast of Saturday Night Live when it aired back in 1975. He was featured alongside notable names such as Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Gilda Radner, and Chevy Chase, and yet was a cast member's name I did not recognize. Hell, they just did a full movie about the first episode and season of Saturday Night Live, and I don't remember seeing him at all. And I found out a core reason for that was he was only credited as a not ready for primetime player for a single episode on October 11th, 1975. While he did continue to show up occasionally throughout the rest of the season, this was the only episode where he was officially credited as a cast member. And besides playing a small role in the first of the iconic SNL Bees sketches, he really didn't get much screen time on his first episode. One of his most notable appearances was in episode 3 of this season, where he played a salesman pitching a voodoo acupuncture doll so you can get surgery while still going about your daily life.
The amazing new scientific breakthrough that combines the ancient art of Chinese acupuncture with the modern convenience of Haitian voodoo.
The sketch fell very flat. It didn't seem to get a single laugh from anyone in the audience, but George really brought a good voice and charisma to the role. So it'd be no surprise that after SNL, he went on to do a lot more acting and voice acting, appearing in shows such as Archer as Woodhouse, voicing Wheeljack in Transformers Dark of the Moon, and showing up in other popular programs like Magnum P.I., Columbo, The West Wing, and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Michael O'Donoghue was another first-season cast member, but unlike George Coe, this was a name that I recognize. Much like George, Michael O'Donoghue was only credited as a cast member for a short period of time, only 3 episodes, but he did have the honor of uttering the first words ever spoken on SNL in their very first sketch, Wolverines.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Side note, if you haven't seen the SNL Wolverine sketch, you should watch it. It is short, it's sweet, and it's historically significant as the first sketch to ever play on the show. And yet, despite being a first-season cast member, the history books remember O'Donoghue more as a writer, as even when he wasn't credited in the cast, he was the show's head writer. And believe it or not, he left/was fired 3 times during his tenure on the show. He was fired the same number of times he appeared as a cast member on the show. He was finally let go for good back in 1985 when he wrote a sketch comparing then NBC president Fred Silverman to Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany, which is a wild sketch to write in the first place, and doubly wild to write about your boss. A lot of his early comedy stylings and behavior were edgy and in poor taste. He even once tied a noose around a Big Bird stuffed animal to show his opposition to writing for Jim Henson's Muppets. He is even quoted as saying, "I don't write for felt. which makes me instantly hate him, F tier. Tom Davis was a cast member for season 5 of SNL, but his tenure actually stretches all the way back to the first season. Tom Davis, along with future cast member, movie star, senator, and ex-senator Al Franken, were heralded as one of the earliest writing duos on the show. And much like other writer-based groups on the show, such as The Lonely Island and Please Don't Destroy, Tom Davis and Al Franken actually had sketches on the air during seasons 3 and 4 when they weren't even cast members.
It's time for the Franken and Davis Show, starring Al Franken and Tom Davis.
Despite not being featured on screen much during his one season as a cast member, Tom Davis continued to write a lot for the show and contribute fan-favorite sketches like The Coneheads, a group of aliens from France.
The name is Conehead. We come from France.
Nick the Lounge Singer, played by Bill Murray, where a dive bar crooner sings all your favorite hits.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.
And The Continental, where Christopher Walken sexually harasses you, the viewer.
Chloroform, smell that?
While Davis did leave the show after his short stint as a cast member in 1980, he ultimately returned as a writer from 1985 to 1994, contributing a lot more to the show's history. Paul Shaffer might be most known for being David Letterman's sidekick and bandleader over his late-night career, but he actually got his start as a member of the SNL house band from season 1. Shaffer would occasionally show up in sketches such as the aforementioned Nick the Lounge Singer, where he accompanied Bill Murray on piano, but in season 5, he became the first and only SNL band member to ever be upgraded to full-time cast member. Which is wild. That's like if SNL announced the new hires for season 51, and your new cast consisted of Ben Marshall, Jeremy Colhane, and Lenny Pickett. He also has the honor of being the first person to ever utter the F word on SNL, so way to go, Paul.
It froze that whole fucking timing off.
Well, fly on your...
Probably his most well-known impression during his time on the show was that of Don Kirshner, a man Google tells me was a very important record producer back in the day. But a notable thing about Paul Shaffer is that despite being a single-season cast member on the show, he would go on to be impersonated by future cast members as well as come back to host, which is truly the best revenge you could ask for getting let go way too early. Remember Dan Aykroyd? Yeah, well, this isn't him. Introducing Peter Aykroyd, Dan's younger brother. You see, following season 4 of SNL, both Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi left the show. And so the brass at NBC, realizing they were losing some major star power, said, let's just promote his brother from writer to cast member, nobody'll know. So while Dan Aykroyd had recurring characters such as Elwood Blues, Two Wild and Crazy Guys, and the Coneheads, Peter Aykroyd brought recurring characters such as... Okay, so he didn't have any recurring characters on the show, and I could only find one instance of him playing a character in a sketch that actually has a name. He played Sean, the largest leprechaun, and I honestly think he only got the role in that sketch because he was taller than everyone else. Every other episode that season, he was relegated to being in the backgrounds of sketches, or more often than not, just being used as a voiceover.
Two innocent travelers who experienced the holiday in horror.
I have not been given much material to work with. Moving on. FlexiSpot was not a cast member on SNL, but they are the sponsor of today's video. If you've been following this channel for a little while, you'll know that FlexiSpot was one of the first companies to take a chance on sponsoring my content, so I am so happy to be here almost 3 years later talking about their E7 standing desk. I have proudly been using my E7 Pro for over 2 years now, and I cannot recommend it enough. First of all, it's much more affordable than other standing desks on the market. Some could say it rises to the occasion. Second of all, it is a very sturdy desk. The camera you're watching through right now is sitting on the desk as we speak, and nothing. And the desk can also support up to 440 pounds, which makes it a perfect place to sleep if your wife's boyfriend kicks you out of bed at night. We've all been there, am I right? Right now, FlexiSpot is running a Black Friday sale where you can get up to 80% off their biggest deals yet. Or better yet, you could even get 100% off your order. Now, how is that possible, you may ask? I don't know. So head on over to flexispot.com or click the link in the description below and use promo code Sully at checkout for an additional $30 off your order. That's promo code Sully, $30 off, flexispot.com. Again, huge thanks to FlexiSpot for making this video possible. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, SNL. Jim Downey's a very interesting case because while he was a single season cast member on the show, he is most well known for being the longest serving writer in the show's history. Of SNL's 50 seasons, Jim Downey was a writer for 30 of them. And during his time as head writer, he brought on a lot of writers that you probably have never heard of, such as Conan O'Brien, Robert Smigel, Bob Odenkirk. Also, side tangent, if you haven't seen Jim Downey's episode of Conan O'Brien's podcast, you are missing out.
Sorry, nice try.
Downey had a hand in writing a lot of the show's political commentary over his 30-year stint, including coming up with the word strategery for Will Ferrell's George Bush impression. He also infamously wrote for Weekend Update with Norm Macdonald, including the thousands of OJ jokes that ended up getting him and Macdonald fired at the end of the season.
Well, it is finally official. Murder is legal in the state of California.
During his single season as a cast member on the show, Downey had the honor of becoming the first of 4 cast members to portray future President George Bush on the show, being superseded by Dana Carvey, Jim Morris, and Fred Armisen, respectively. Besides that impression, Downey only appeared in a few other sketches that season, usually as background or passing roles, with the very rare instance of him leading a sketch, only one by my count.
Hi, I'm Craig. I'm cheaper and more reliable than American Express because I never leave my apartment.
While he was inevitably dropped from the show after season 5, he continued to make many cameos and appearances throughout the rest of his time at the show. And no, I will not be providing you the context for that clip. Do your own research, pervert. Tom Schiller is yet another person that, despite having a long and successful tenure at SNL, was only promoted to cast member for a single season. He was mostly known for directing short films on the show over his 11 years working there. He directed some great short films on the show, such as Don't Look Back in Anger, a hauntingly prescient film where John Belushi plays an older version of himself visiting all the graves of his former cast members. John Belushi would in fact be the first original cast member to pass away just 4 years later, being survived by all of his former castmates. He also directed and starred in another iconic sketch many years later, Schiller Vision's Hidden Camera Commercials, where Chris Farley finds out that his coffee was replaced with decaffeinated coffee crystals and has a perfectly normal reaction.
You no good damn.
But during season 5, Schiller, by my count, only showed up 4 or 5 times in sketches, never serving as anything other than a background character. Simply put, Schiller's best contributions to the show were when he wasn't on screen as a cast member, so allowing him to work full-time on short films was a great move by the show. Alan Zweibel is another writer who originated with the show back in 1975, but was only promoted to full-time cast member in 1980 for season 5. His most famous creation on the show prior to his tenure as a cast member was writing and creating the character of Rosanna Dana for Gilda Radner, a close friend of his who he worked many times with outside of the show and even wrote a memoir about her after her passing. He also notably wrote a joke for Chevy Chase on the first installation of Weekend Update, a joke that he claims is the reason he got the job.
The post office announced today that it is going to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp, but if you want to lick it, it's a quarter.
It's always a shame to have to admit that people like Zweibel didn't have notable roles on the show, even being relegated to being a still image in Weekend Update, not once, not twice, but 4 times. But sometimes people are just better suited as writers. Okay, now this is where the video goes slightly off the rails, so bear with me. After season 5, the show's creator, Lorne Michaels, left the show, along with the entire cast and most of the writing staff, which is not good for the show. So SNL experienced a complete overhaul. Producer Gene Domanion took the reins from Lorne Michaels and was fired just 12 episodes into the season. SNL co-creator Dick Ebersole was then flown out to replace her after her ousting, and got rid of most of the cast she had put in place, opting instead to hire 5 new cast members personally. Of the 13 cast members that were in season 6 of the show, 9 of them were fired after a single season, which means we now have to go over 9 cast members that were fired after the train wreck that was season 6. God help us. Denny Dillon initially auditioned for SNL during its first season, but was looked over and only found her way onto the show 5 years later. Dillon immediately had a recurring character on the show named Pinky Waxman, a public access television host who couldn't care less about her guests.
The Walt Disney picture is the last flight of...
Well, you know the one thing I love about Barbara?
What?
She never got a nose job.
I'd also like to point out that many of these sketches on YouTube have under 3,000 views, which is kind of insane to me. The character of Pinky Waxman would even go on to appear outside of the show on Arsenio Hall, which kind of felt like SNL thought they had a star in the making and were getting her name out there. She also had a sketch about a new pastime called speed listening, so you could listen to your music in a much more time-efficient manner. It's played for laughs, but I find it funny that all these years later, it is legitimately a feature built into most streaming streaming platforms. Denny Dillon was truly ahead of her time. Of all the people we've talked about so far, Dillon was definitely the most prolific cast member of this era. She seemed to be really carrying a lot of these earlier sketches, which explains how she then survived the first round of Ebersole cuts. But unfortunately, she just wasn't able to rise to the levels of Eddie Murphy or Joe Piscopo, or at least not in Dick Ebersole's eyes, and so she was unceremoniously ousted after just 13 episodes. Did you know Gilbert Gottfried was on the show? Yes, that Gilbert Gottfried. And I'm going to possibly ruin a couple childhoods here. That iconic voice that you love him so much for, it wasn't real. And if you don't believe me, here is a clip of Gilbert Gottfried on one of his first episodes of SNL.
Oh, I'm Gilbert Gottfried, and everyone is always asking me how I got on this show. Well, here's how, so you can watch.
So this season is chock full of uncanny appearances by Gilbert Gottfried, where he not only just uses his own voice, but will do character voices and accents, something you wouldn't expect from him in his later career.
Thank heaven for little girls. They grow up in the most delightful way.
But there were a few moments where I noticed him kind of slip into the persona that he would use in his later stand-up, which is kind of fascinating to see show up so early.
And I was ready to use it even if it meant to stretch in the pen. Nothing could stand in my way. Cut! Look, I can't work this way.
Gottfried seemingly did not have a positive experience on the show, saying he did not get along with the writers and that the cards were stacked against them from the get-go. He said that since his cast was replacing the very first cast of SNL, everyone automatically hated them. In his own words, he compared the concept of changing out the cast of SNL to replacing the members of the Beatles at the height of Beatlemania. One of my favorite pieces he did on the show this season was crime forecaster Marv Peters, where he played a very cheery weatherman reporting on crime levels across the country.
Chicago had the nation's low today of a mere 12 murders. Around the country, we see Boston, and that's 23, New York, 19, Philadelphia, warmed up a little from yesterday.
I genuinely enjoyed Gilbert Gottfried's time on the show. I felt like he was a pretty solid cast member, but I'm also not going to complain about him getting fired, because if he hadn't, we probably wouldn't have gotten all the material he gave us in the future.
The aristocrats!
Yvonne Hudson was the very first African-American female to be cast on SNL. It was genuinely a huge achievement, and even seems like a big achievement today, because as of recording this, SNL has only had 8 African-American female cast members of the 172 cast members on the show. I think SNL has always struggled with representation. I remember Kenan Thompson basically having to put his foot down and tell the show, I am not going to be your go-to person to play African-American females anymore. You have to hire a black woman. Interestingly enough, Hudson was actually a receptionist for SNL before she was hired as a cast member. Writer Mitchell Kriegman claimed that at the time, she was the only other black person in the building besides Eddie Murphy. But unfortunately, while you can say SNL might have taken a step in the right direction by hiring a black woman for the show, they didn't seem to have the nerve to put her in any sketches. Hudson, like many other single-season cast members, was rarely given a chance to shine on the show. And interestingly enough, after she was fired by Dick Ebersole mid-season, she was basically never seen in the public eye ever again. Genuinely, her only on-screen appearance in any media was during her time on SNL, and nobody has been able to track her down in the 45 years since her tenure. I can only hope that this is by her own accord and she is happily living out her life somewhere, just knowing how much she paved the way for so many other future comedians on the show. I'm just gonna take the time now to read you the entirety of Matthew Lawrence's page on the Saturday Night Live wiki, so bear with me. Matthew Laurence is an American actor who was a featured player during season 6. He was let go with much of the cast when Dick Ebersole took over as producer. And that's it. That's his entire page, so my hopes are not high for his contributions to the show. And boy, was I correct. Matthew Lawrence showed up very sporadically during his 12 episodes before being fired, very rarely having any role or character of note in a sketch. I would say, ironically enough, I think his most notable contribution was in the form of a sketch where he played himself as a reporter inside the spaceship from Atari's Asteroids game. His performance was fine. I mean, he was mostly just there to let Eddie Murphy shine, as was most of the cast that season, but, you know, I thought he played the exasperated reporter well.
I want the blip. It's big, don't man. Don't fight. That's a legit blip, okay?
But for the rest of the season, he'd mostly be playing guy number 2 and background actor number 3 in most sketches. After the show, he went on to have a recurring role on 90210, and he's currently a radio show host in Kentucky. And that's all I have to say about that. Next cast member. Gail Matthius, in addition to being a cast member this season, also co-hosted Weekend Update with Charles Rocket, who we will get to in a minute. She was one of very few cast members this season to have a recurring character or sketch, with hers being Vicky the Valley Girl. And if you're familiar with the term Valley Girl, your brain has already correctly predicted exactly what this sketch was.
Sure, ruin our reputations. God, forget it. Excuse me for living. Get out of here, Debbie. God, forget it.
Now, Gail actually did show up in quite a few sketches this year. I would say she was trying to fill the void that Gilda Radner left, even though we know that nobody could fill that void. Like I said, she did host Weekend Update with Charles Rocket, but she was only added to the desk halfway through the season. This left her with only 5 episodes to find her footing at the Weekend Update desk, which is just not enough time for anyone. Seriously, go back and watch some of the earliest Weekend Updates with Colin Jost and Michael Che, and you'll be surprised that they're not great. They are nowhere near as good as what they put out now, so Gail Matthius being a bad Weekend Update host isn't so much a knock on her as it is a knock on the show for not allowing her time to grow. She also notably played Nancy Reagan quite a few times on the show, but even a performer with many recurring characters and impressions was not safe from Dick Ebersole. Including, and Risley also had quite the prolific 12 episodes in terms of screen time, and yet there's not much notable about her time on the show. She didn't really have any mainstaying characters or impressions on the show, so she would just kind of hop around from sketch to sketch, just playing the roles that are written for her without really being able to make her mark on the show. But when she was on screen, I would say she was perfectly passable. I don't think she rose to the level of someone like Denny Dillon, but she did have quite a few sketches that made me laugh. I particularly enjoyed a sketch she did with Charles Rocket where they were playing divorcing parents, letting their children know that, without any confusion, they are the reason that their parents are breaking up.
Sometimes the children think that they might be partially to blame, so we wanted you to know that, well, your father and I consider you two entirely at fault.
What do you mean it's our fault? No, come on, now, let's not get upset. It's just that things were better before you came along.
Ultimately, Anne was let go with a majority of the cast after just 12 episodes, and while she did go on to play some small roles in films, she has since mostly retired from acting. Charles Rocket. There is a lot to say about him. In his very first episode, in his very first speaking role, he introduces himself as kind of a cross between Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. Yes, let's immediately compare ourselves to 2 of the most liked cast members from the previous cast that you're replacing. That's certainly won't lead the audience to immediately resent you. So Rocket's mainly known as being the 5th Weekend Update host, taking over the reins from Bill Murray and Jane Curtin in season 5. He is very consistently ranked as one of the worst hosts of Weekend Update, but I try not to hold that against him because once again, he only had 12 episodes of material to work with. But one segment of his I really did like was the Rocket Report, which was a man on the street style pre-tape where he played a reporter in mostly unscripted sketches.
Charlene, you look excited.
I am. It stinks down here.
She says it stinks. What a comment on New York's subway system already from the girl from LA.
I feel like of all the recurring bits in season 6, this was like one of the few that could consistently get me to crack a smile. And that is high praise for this season. But I think what he's most known for in SNL lore is being the second person to say the F word on Saturday Night Live. You see, there was an ongoing bit throughout the night of all of the male cast members wanting to take Charles Rocket out because he seemingly had a relationship with every other female cast member. In the final sketch of the night, he gets shot, he's then bandaged up and brought out for goodnights, where he mumbles the famous quote,
"Oh man, it's the first time I've ever been shot in my life. I'd like to know who fuck did it."
Now, supposedly NBC was already fed up with Gene Dominion, but this was the final nail in the coffin. They flew in Dick Ebersole to watch the show the following week, and then Gene and Charles were both immediately fired. So it is commonly understood that this slip might have cost him the job at the show. And this is the second single-season cast member to drop the F-bomb on national television. I wonder if we'll get another. I think Patrick Weathers has to be the most underutilized cast member of the Gene Domanion era. very rarely showing up during his 12 episodes. It's genuinely difficult to find any sketches that feature him in any notable capacity, with only 2 coming up, one where he plays Bob Dylan, and one where he plays Ravi Shankar while wearing blackface. Yikes, I think we can move on. Speaking of underutilized cast members, Laurie Metcalf was one of the 5 cast members hired by Dick Ebersole when he took over mid-season. Now, normally this would mean she would have half a season to find her footing and make her mark on the show, but Dick Ebersole ended up canceling the entirety of the season after just 1 episode in control because he was not happy with the writing staff or the cast. So this is the only episode featuring Laurie Metcalf, and she only appears in a single Weekend Update piece. She is a Weekend Update correspondent on the streets asking New York residents if they would take a bullet for the president. And it is genuinely one of the most confusing things I have seen all season, because it is not played for laughs. She is just getting genuine and earnest responses from New Yorkers saying how they would take a bullet for their mother and ones they love.
Is there someone you would take a bullet for?
Yes, it would. I would take a bullet for my family or my children or my wife or my loved ones, something like that.
I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but there was no second beat. That was the whole segment, and I genuinely have no idea what it was trying to prove. I mean, it's really hard to judge a cast member off of 1 appearance. But you know what's even harder to judge? Emily Prager was the 2nd cast member to be hired by Dick Ebersole when he took over in season 6, and much like Laurie Metcalf, she only lasted a single episode. But unlike Laurie Metcalf, she did not appear in a single sketch. She is the only SNL cast member to have not appeared on the show, despite being a credited cast member in the opening credits. She was reportedly a writer for the show in the earlier seasons, and she made a few uncredited, non-speaking cameos in the backgrounds of sketches, but she was ultimately fired before she ever had a chance to properly take the stage. It kind of blows my mind that both Laurie Metcalf and Emily Prager were both personally handpicked by Dick Ebersole, yet he fired them almost immediately. What was he trying to make room for? Enter Christine Ebersole. Okay, when I first saw her name pop up on the list, I was so ready to scream nepotism. As it turns out, she has absolutely no relation to Dick Ebersole, despite having very similar last names. My bad. Now, by this time, Weekend Update was going through one of its many rebrands, so Ebersole was now the host of SNL Newsbreak. Same sketch, different name. She co-anchored alongside Brian Doyle Murray, brother of Bill Murray, who was brought back to the cast in season 7, but she only was an anchor for the last 6 episodes of the season, once again giving her little to no time to adapt to the update desk. Now, besides being a SNL Newsbreak anchor, Ebersole was actually a very accomplished singer. She very famously performed an original song in a sketch written by writer Michael O'Donoghue called Single Women, and it's sung without a hint of irony or comedy, and it's actually quite beautiful. That very song would later go on to be covered by Dolly Parton in 1982, and would even reach number 8 on the Billboard country music charts. It's really hard to think of a time in recent history where SNL put out a sketch or segment that really wasn't looking to get laughs, save for the occasional cold open marking the occurrence of a tragedy, such as featuring a Ukrainian choir marking the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022. So with her singing talents, it is no surprise that they had her sing as much as possible on the show, including a sketch where she sings about how much she misses her husband while she's very clearly cleaning up the crime scene. And after SNL, she would go on to win 2 Tony Awards. And interestingly enough, there have been 4 SNL cast members to have won a Tony Award, and all 4 of them were single-season cast members. All I'm trying to say is Chloe Trost still has a chance. Billy Crystal is another name that leads you to think, I had no idea he got his start on SNL. Well, the truth is, he didn't. By the time he joined the show in season 10, he was already a very well-known stand-up comic and actor, appearing on The Tonight Show, the ABC sitcom Soap, and his own short-lived NBC variety show. And oh yeah, he had also hosted SNL twice before becoming a cast member. Again, that's like if among the new faces for season 51 was Bill Burr. Granted, this is just a hypothetical situation. I know Bill Burr has his hands full counting all that fresh blood money he got. Billy Crystal's most notable contribution to the show was his impression of Fernando Lamas, an impression he did 9 times over the 17-episode season, meaning that character appeared almost every other episode. You might remember the character for the catchphrase, "You look marvelous." He also had several other notable impressions on the show, such as Sammy Davis Jr. Oh no. That is 2 counts of racial appropriation from single season cast members on SNL, and I'm sure no one will ever do blackface on SNL ever. Christopher Guest is another new cast member this season who had already previously appeared on the show as a guest. See what I did there? He had appeared as part of the group Spinal Tap in the previous season and was then asked on to become a cast member in season 10. He also joins the ranks of a very select few anchors of Weekend Update, SNL Newsbreak, Saturday Night News. What is going on? For the first half of the season, Saturday Night News was anchored by the host of that episode, so Christopher Guest only got to anchor for 9 episodes, which, is more than some people got. During his brief time on the show, he debuted another brand new musical act with his Spinal Tap co-stars, the Folksmen. After this season, the group would sometimes have the Folksmen open for Spinal Tap on tour, and they were also a central point of the 2003 film A Mighty Wind, which I highly recommend. His most notable contributions this season were alongside Billy Crystal as Frankie and Willie, 2 brothers who finish each other's very specific sentences.
The other day, I took one of them,
meat thermometers?
Yeah. And I just shoved it into my ear, as far as it could go, but then I took one of them,
ball-peen hammers.
Right. And just whacked it a few times right in there,
Boy, that was smart.
I know, I hate when that happens.
And to answer the age-old question, just because your friend Billy Crystal does blackface on the show, does that mean you automatically do it too? The answer is yes. Yes, he did. Rich Hall was a cast member on Fridays in 1981, which was ABC's attempt to capitalize off of the success of SNL. After his single-season tenure on that show, he hopped over to have a single-season tenure on this show, which has to be a first. Hall didn't really appear that often in sketches across the season, more often appearing during Saturday Night News or in the very aptly named Rich Hall's Election Report. One character he was known for playing on Update was Robert Latta, a real person who I guess had snuck into the White House earlier that year. Hall's character would constantly stumble onto the set and interrupt the news, only to show off pictures of him being caught in increasingly odd places. But ultimately, outside of Update, he really didn't contribute much to the show, which made it a very easy decision to cut him loose at the end of the season. Martin Short was on the show for season 10. Can you believe it? Before his time on SNL, Martin Short was a cast member on Second City Television in Canada. It was basically another version of SNL, and it was even being optioned as a replacement to SNL during the time when ratings were not so good. Now, Martin Short was in so many sketches this season that his back was probably aching from carrying this show so hard. He most famously played a character named Ed Grimley on his very first episode, a character that he would go on to reprise 5 more times that season. This was actually a character he had developed back on SCTV, and you can find earlier clips of the character on that show online. But needless to say, the character was an instant hit. It even got a spin-off cartoon show. Sure, it only lasted 13 episodes, but that's more episodes than some people get on this show. I don't think anything else he did on the show ever rose to the level of Ed Grimley, besides maybe Jackie Rogers Jr., but even having just 1 or 2 breakout characters on the show is a huge achievement. Obviously, since his departure, he's come back to host numerous times, recently joining the Five Timers Club, and will sometimes just show up in an episode unannounced. You gotta love him. Pamela Stephenson also starred in a separate sketch comedy show before SNL. It was a British show called Not the 9 O'Clock News, where she appeared alongside many other well-known British actors, such as Rowan Atkinson. Stephenson was one of only 3 female cast members on SNL at the time, and between the 3, she was definitely given the least amount of screen time. The other 2 cast members were Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Mary Gross, both who were well-seasoned cast members and performers by that point, so it only makes sense that the featured player got less roles than them. Her most prominent character on the show was that of Angela Bradley, something she did on Weekend Update twice, but besides that, she just wasn't able to really do anything to make her mark on the show and make her stand out from the rest. Joan Cusack definitely falls under the category of people who were just fine without SNL because, wow, look at her filmography. Toy Story, School of Rock, that really weird Muppet Christmas movie that nobody talks about. But in a season of the show where nearly everyone was fired, did she ever stand a chance? This was a really weird year for SNL because they were trying to reinvent themselves seemingly without knowing what they were transforming into. Peacock has a great documentary that they made about this season for the show's 50th anniversary. I would highly recommend it. And while there was certainly no shortage of sketches she was in that season, she was just never able to break out like people like Jon Lovitz. So she was always written to play side roles whenever they needed a nondescript woman character in a sketch. But her performances were always solid, which makes it kind of a mystery to me why she was fired in the first place. I mean, like I mentioned, most people this season were fired, so I guess I shouldn't read too much into it. Robert Downey Jr. is someone that nobody has ever heard of and never did anything notable in his career, so I think we're just gonna move on. Anthony Michael Hall joined the show alongside... Okay, I'm kidding. We'll talk a little bit about Iron Man, but trust me, there's not much to cover. For what it's worth, Robert Downey, as he's credited in the intro cards, actually got a fair amount of screen time this season. I attribute this partially to the smaller cast size, or at least small compared to today's cast. I think one of the most talked about sketches he was in was called Suitcase Boy, something he has brought up in numerous interviews, stating it was the only thing he ever wrote that made it to the show. And by his own admission, it's not good.
It was so not funny, except to me and my weirdo friends.
And I was thinking, it can't possibly be that bad. And then I watched it, and oh boy.
I know why whales beach themselves. Spider-Man told me!
I like to think Marvel executives were sitting around watching old SNL reruns, saw Suitcase Boy, and went, yeah, there's our Iron Man. He had a few small bits throughout the season, none of them particularly funny, and he's often ranked as one of the worst cast members in the show's 51-season history.
Ladies and gentlemen, as they say, one man's is another man's poisson.
But he's also worth like $300 million, so who's laughing now? Not the audience while he was on the show. Anthony Michael Hall joined the show alongside Robert Downey Jr. this season, and this was after he had already starred in movies like The Breakfast Club. He actually was the one to get Robert Downey Jr. the audition, so you can blame him for Suitcase Boy.
Jude kills soil!
While he's also usually ranked pretty low on the cast member tier lists, he did have a couple good recurring characters, such as Craig Sundberg, Idiot Savant, and I honestly can't help but get Chad vibes from these sketches.
Okay.
I also want to point out this sketch he did with Tony Danza because I want to give him credit for some of the most authentic looking fake punch reactions I have ever seen on the show. It doesn't sound like high praise, but fake punches on the show often look god-awful, so this is actually quite impressive. Compared to other cast members this season, Anthony Michael Hall never had really that much screen time, so he didn't have a chance to shine, but at the same time, he wasn't really given a chance to flounder, so he's not at all a bad cast member, just an unremarkable one. Before Randy Quaid was constantly on the run from law enforcement, seriously, I just read his Wikipedia page. What the hell is going on there? He was a cast member on season 11 of SNL. Randy Quaid was also someone who had a bit of notoriety before even joining the show as a cast member, already starring in films like Of Mice and Men, and starring alongside fellow cast member Anthony Michael Hall in National Lampoon's Vacation. On the show, Quaid was given the very prestigious role of playing then President Ronald Reagan, which will guarantee any cast member a hefty amount of screen time. And aside from that, he would show up sporadically throughout the season. One sketch of his that I did particularly enjoy was one where he's complaining about a sore big toe while simultaneously asking his family to perform tasks like
Pound a nail into this floorboard here, huh? It's loose. Oh, yeah, sure, Dad. Where is it? Right here by my sore toe. Oh.
And so for like 5 minutes, you're on the edge of your seat waiting for him to get injured, only for him to actually hang himself in the final 10 seconds of the sketch. What drugs were the writers on this season? The answer? A lot of them. Terry Sweeney is very notable because he was the first openly gay cast member in the show's history. And I just want to emphasize up front how important that is before I delve too deep into things. Now on the show, Sweeney was often playing women characters such as Joan Rivers and most famously Nancy Reagan, and it's definitely not my place to make any judgments here, so I don't know whether or not this was a specific choice by Sweeney or if this was the only way that the writers knew how to write for a gay man. Speaking of SNL not knowing how to write for a gay man, when Chevy Chase hosted this season, he pitched a sketch where Terry Sweeney, the person, has AIDS, and they weigh him every week on the show to see how much weight he lost. So in case you didn't know it by now, Chevy Chase is a dick. On the show, Sweeney also played roles such as Diana Ross. God damn it. They literally have a black woman on the cast. But I guess because she was already in this sketch playing a different character, the writers just said, bring out the blackface. But hey, at least they didn't have him play Patti LaBelle. Just kidding, they absolutely did. SNL and blackface. Name a more horrific duo. When Sweeney wasn't playing a woman in a sketch, he was largely absent from the show. I personally think this is a case of the writers specifically casting him in effeminate or female roles. Now, whether it was out of ignorance or malice, your guess is as good as mine. But honestly, with them still doing blackface on the show when they have a black woman on the cast, I don't think malice is out of the question. Danitra Vance was the second African-American woman to be cast on SNL, and much like Yvonne Hudson, she was fired after just one season. It's almost as if SNL was trying to feign some sort of diversity by hiring black women, only to immediately fire them. Now, legally, I'm not allowed to say that the people who were running SNL back then were racist. Now, during her time on the show, Danitra Vance was very vocal about her disdain for the writers constantly casting her in stereotypical roles. That includes Cabrini Green, Harlem Watts Jackson, an uneducated 17-year-old mother of two, and LaToya Marie, who appeared in a sketch simply titled, That Black Girl. Which isn't to say that either of those sketches were specifically racist, and in fact, I would say that she did a good job of steering the sketches back into a direction that could almost be considered commentary from her perspective as a black woman. But the writers just seem to really like casting her in roles that maybe align with how they outwardly perceive her. Because whenever they needed someone to actually portray a real-life black woman, they just slapped some blackface on one of their male performers. And what makes it worse is that Danitra Vance was so underutilized this season. As if the blackface wasn't racist enough, it just feels like a personal insult to her presence on the show. Dan Vitale is a name that I had straight up never heard, and after doing some research, I understand why. So Dan Vitale was hired on as a cast member at the beginning of the season, and only appeared sporadically across the first 3 episodes. After the initial 3 episodes in November of 1985, Dan Vitale would go on to miss the next 5 episodes as he reportedly went to rehab for his drug and alcohol addiction. He finally returned to the show on February 8th of 1986, yet another episode where he was relegated to the background, and was immediately fired officially after the episode for his continued drug and alcohol use. Vitale claimed that during all of his appearances on the show, he was, quote, bombed out of his mind and nearly missed several sketches because he was getting either drunk or high in his dressing room. So he obviously was not a cast member they could rely on, which makes sense why they cut him loose halfway through the season. Damon Wayans is the last of the season 11 casualties, and yet another cast member who was fired midway through the season. You see, Wayans wasn't heavily utilized this season and was becoming increasingly frustrated with the roles that were written for him, so he broke one of the cardinal rules of SNL. You don't go off script. In the Monopoly Man sketch, he is supposed to be playing a police officer, and nothing more than that. He is the straight man in this sketch. But as soon as they started doing the sketch on the live broadcast, he suddenly gave his character a very effeminate voice and characteristics as a giant middle finger to the whole production.
Yes, we've got the whole transaction on videotape. We got 3 people that saw you kill that undercover cop.
It inevitably threw off the sketch, and Wayans was fired immediately following the end of the episode. But for whatever reason, Lorne Michaels decided to be the bigger man of the situation and invite Damon Wayans back on the show a few months later for the season finale, not as a cast member, but as a special guest to do some stand-up. But I don't think he could be too salty about it, because he went on to thrive in projects like In Living Color in ways that he was not thriving on SNL. Skipping now to season 14, did you know Ben Stiller was a cast member? Probably not, because he was barely on the show. You see, back during season 12 of the show, Ben Stiller created a short film called The Hustler of Money, which wound up airing on SNL despite him not having a connection with the show. 2 seasons later, he was offered a role on the show as a performer and writer, and he lasted a total of 4 episodes, appearing on screen only 9 times. He supposedly left after realizing the show wasn't having him produce more short films, which was the only thing he was specifically interested in. I really wish I had more to say about his time on the show, but truly some of the most notable things he did came from later on when he either hosted or guested on the show. Beth Cahill actually didn't join the season 17 cast until 6 episodes into the season. Normally this is a huge obstacle for performers because now you have even less time to prove yourself, but Beth hit the ground running. By her 2nd episode, she had already established a recurring character, Denise Swirsky, and if you're wondering where you've heard that name before,
Starburst.
She also established the Delta 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 sorority sketch alongside fellow cast members Siobhan Fallon and Melanie Hutzel, a sketch they did 4 times over 11 episodes in the back end of season 17. And for what it's worth, I really enjoyed her on the show. I think she was a great utility player, someone who could play the straight woman in one sketch and then immediately go into some goofy character acting.
Or better yet, an all-over bronzer will give you an instant tan.
I am not sure if this one counts as racial appropriation, but it seems like as the season went on, she started appearing less and less, even being completely shut out of numerous episodes. So sometimes just because a performer seems to do great on the show does not mean they're a great fit for the show behind the scenes, which I can only imagine is the case. Siobhan Fallon is another actress who seems to have just thrived outside of SNL, but was never able to make her mark on the show. Like Beth Cahill, she also appeared in the Delta 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 sketches, but for the most part, she just kind of disappeared into the background. And you can hardly blame her. This cast was stacked. She was constantly competing for screen time with Chris Farley, Phil Hartman, Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, and Adam Sandler, and the show was still very much a boys' club. So after you see that cast lineup, it kind of makes sense why some performers weren't really given a chance to break out on the show this season. Siobhan Fallon went on to star in Forrest Gump just 2 years later, and her career has never recovered. So in the back of my head, I knew Sarah Silverman was a cast member at one point, but I was still surprised to see her in the era of Adam Sandler and Chris Farley. For whatever reason, I would have always placed her in a much later season in my head, and I have no explanation for that. Sarah's time on SNL was unremarkable. In fact, I would say it was so unremarkable, it almost becomes remarkable. She was completely shut out of 3 of her 20 episodes, and in an additional 7 episodes, she was either only featured as a voiceover or only featured as an audience member in the monologue. She has since said that none of the sketches she wrote ever made it to air, which would explain the lack of roles given to her. But she did get a really nice update feature where she talks about news that only pertains to her personal life.
Sarah, did anything else happen this week?
Yeah. Oh, well, I pierced my boyfriend's ear, and Ukraine agreed to disarm all its nuclear weapons. That's it.
She thrives in a setting like this because it's much more similar to stand-up, and I think she could have done a lot more on Weekend Update, but unfortunately this was her only time behind the desk. It's almost ironic how it could be argued Melissa Villaseñor's impression of Sarah Silverman is more memorable than her time on the show.
I just want everyone to get along. With my vagina.
Chris Elliott was a name I had never heard before, and so I was surprised to find out just how prolific he was in his single season of SNL. It seems like he was constantly in sketches and not just in the background like so many other single season players. Although I will say there's at least one sketch of his that did not age well. It revolves around a marketing firm using an ad with an interracial couple, and that's bad for business. Because everyone's racist. So with that sketch in mind, I bet you wouldn't be surprised to find out that season 20 of SNL is widely regarded as one of the worst in the show's history. Lorne Michaels has claimed that that season was the closest he ever got to being fired and having the show taken off the air. So it's no surprise that at the end of the season, a huge chunk of the writing staff and cast were let go in order to allow the show to reinvent itself. Following season 20, here is a list of cast members that were let go by the show. Ellen Cleghorn, Chris Farley, Al Franken, Michael McKean, Mike Myers, Jay Moore, Kevin Nealon, Adam Sandler, Chris Elliott, and 3 additional single-season cast members. But funny enough, Elliott's legacy at SNL was far from over because in 2008, his daughter Abby Elliott joined the show, making her the only child of a former cast member to become a cast member themselves. Welcome back to Janeane Garofalo's expedition to Mount Everest. Before being cast on SNL, Janeane Garofalo had already experienced some minor television success, starring on The Ben Stiller Show and The Larry Sanders Show, but she would not find as much critical acclaim on her season of SNL because season 20. She played tons of characters on the show, ranging from Hillary Clinton to Martha Stewart, but none of these characters ever became more than a one-off impression, and so she, like many other cast members before her, was relegated to small supporting roles in tons of sketches. She actually left the show mid-season after just 14 episodes, and she would go on to say her time at SNL was one of the most miserable periods of her life. Laura Keitlinger, yet another casualty of season 20. I should mention that season 20 of SNL took place at the height of the O.J. Simpson trial in 1994 and 1995. So Laura Keitlinger's biggest role on the show was portraying lead prosecutor Marcia Clark, an impression she did 8 times that year. But besides that relatively small role and 2 update features, she wasn't seen in many sketches, save for the time that she had the honor of playing the role of whore. Did I not tell you SNL was misogynistic? I honestly think that Laura Keitlinger is the single most underutilized person in the cast this season. That is, if it weren't for Morwenna Banks. She joined the cast on the 17th episode of the season, leaving just 4 episodes to prove her worth and escape the layoffs that were right around the corner. And was she able to make her mark on the show? Not really. She starred in a grand total of 9 sketches where she was given small supporting roles, and a single Weekend Update spot where she played Little Girl, a character she brought over from her time on the comedy show Absolutely.
And she does look like a lady, but I think he really is really a man.
But 4 episodes at the end of an already abysmal season is just not enough time to prove yourself, and so she was laid off with most of the cast and went on to play Mama Pig in Peppa Pig. So, to you. David Koechner might be most well known for his roles alongside fellow cast member Will Ferrell in movies like Anchorman, or for playing that one really unlikable character in The Office. But before that, he was a cast member during the 21st season of SNL. Now, David Koechner actually had a really solid season for a first-time cast member and had a ton of screen time. Not only that, but he was able to come up with multiple characters that would end up recurring during his time on the show, such as Fagin, who showed up 7 times.
Only you would have had the skill to administer such a firm and spiritual spanking.
Good God. Also a character named T-Bone, a character he did for his audition.
What do you think there, Mr. Murderman? You think that'll do the trick?
And yet, despite having an incredibly strong start on the show, he was let go at the end of the season. Was it because he was up against heavy hitters like Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon and Sherry O'Terry? Perhaps. But Koechner himself claims that it was the work of 2 individuals, an executive and a writer, that forced him out of the show, and he has yet to reveal those 2 names. Truly, sometimes show business does not make sense. Nancy Walls was another cast member that joined in season 21 alongside David Koechner and also went on to star in The Office. Small world. Now, Nancy had a decent amount of screen time this season, but for most of her appearances, she was playing the straight man in the sketches, whether it be in the role of a mom or dozens of talk show hosts. Although a sketch of hers that really stands out is Wake Up and Smile, a morning talk show whose teleprompter goes out, leaving the 2 anchors to lose all semblance of reality.
The weatherman is dead!
The monologue and emotions of reading the teleprompter at the end are genuinely hilarious. But she was competing for airtime with strong character actors like Molly Shannon and Sherry O'Terry, who are more likely to lead a sketch. Nancy Walls has made a few cameos on the show since her departure, mostly when her Office co-star and real-life husband Steve Carell comes to host, but I think her time on the show has largely been forgotten by most. Speaking of The Office, Jerry Minor became a cast member for season 26. Alright, he only actually appeared in 2 episodes of The Office in a season that nobody watched, so it's understandable if you don't recognize him from that. And it also makes sense why you wouldn't remember him from his time on SNL, because he was surrounded by a murderer's row of comedians. Will Ferrell, Chris Parnell, Maya Rudolph, that one sexual predator. Speaking of which, it's really unfortunate because one of Jerry Minor's most well-known sketches is alongside Horatio Sands, which makes it kind of a hard watch. I'm assuming Horatio just heard the word minor and said, I'm in! He also appeared on Weekend Update as Al Sharpton alongside Daryl Hammond as Jesse Jackson. Jesus Christ! But aside from his Grandmaster Rap character and the occasional Update appearance, Jerry Minor was very underutilized this season. Minor was let go at the end of season 26 alongside longtime cast member Chris Parnell, with budget cuts being cited. However, Chris Parnell would be rehired midway through season 27, but Jerry Minor was not asked to return. Did you know Rob Riggle was on the show? Neither did anybody who watched this season. Oh, also, he's the 4th single-season cast member in a row to appear on The Office. I think it honestly might be a curse at this point. He appeared once on Weekend Update as a street prophet named Leviticus, and it was only 1 of 3 times I could find where he led a sketch or piece on the show.
And their insatiable thirst for alcohol, which we all know comes from the flaming teat of Satan.
All right.
Although I did thoroughly enjoy the sketch where he and Luke Wilson sensually feed each other food while their dates look on in abject horror. But aside from that, he was definitely the least utilized cast member this season, usually only being used as a one-off impression or a background character. But despite that, he went on to almost immediately book The Daily Show after his time on SNL, so I'd say he went on to be probably one of the more successful single-season cast members. Michaela Watkins was hired on for the show's 34th season, becoming at the time the oldest woman to be cast on the show at 37 years old, which is not that old. I guess it just proves how much the show relies on young blood. She was another mid-season hire, joining only 8 episodes in alongside previously mentioned cast member Abby Elliott, both of whom were picked over, I kid you not, Aubrey Plaza. I could seriously make a whole video about famous people who tried out for SNL but didn't get the job, but maybe another time. So Michaela Watkins didn't show up until the 8th episode of the season, but I would argue she didn't start getting utilized until her 12th episode, where she was finally able to debut her Hoda Kotb impression alongside Kristen Wiig's Kathy Lee Gifford. I would say it was arguably one of her most popular characters on the show, even though it was just basically a vehicle for more Kristen Wiig screen time. That is, until later in the season when she was able to score with a Weekend Update character in the form of blogger Angie Tempura.
Fast and Furious. I wish Vin Diesel would take a fast walk into a furious wood chipper. Bitch, please.
Honestly, this might be one of my favorite Weekend Update characters from a single season cast member. It is the perfect mix of cringe and awkwardness, and I love it. So it absolutely sucks that it seems like Michaela Watkins was finally finding her footing on the show just mere episodes before being fired. Jenny Slate joined the cast for season 35, and she is the 3rd single season cast member to say the F word on SNL. And on her first episode, nonetheless.
You know what? You stood up for yourself, and I fucking love you for that.
That is the face of someone who knows the FCC is coming after them. All I'm saying is, the data tells me if you say f*** on SNL, you're not gonna make it. SNL wasn't done using Kristen Wiig's Kathy Lee Gifford impression, and so having just fired Michaela Watkins, one of the first things Jenny Slate did on the show was take over the role of Hoda Kotb. I should also note that after firing Jenny Slate after this season, they still wanted to do that sketch, so they recast the role a 3rd time, giving the role of Hoda Kotb to longtime cast member Nasim Pedrad before retiring the sketch altogether. For whatever reason, I seem to remember Jenny Slate having a lot more screen time on the show, so I was surprised to find out that she basically only had one notable character, Tina Chanuse.
You need a custom-made car horn that speaks to you, like this. Beep beep, I am your car.
But aside from the 3 Tina sketches she did that season, you are most likely to find her singing in the background of What Up With That, something they did a lot that season. With so little screen time, it's no surprise that SNL cut her loose at the end of the season, but honestly, I'm actually glad, because she went on to do so many things that better showcased her talents and earned her that money, please! Tim Robinson, what can I say about him that hasn't already been said by every single comedy enjoyer online? Tim Robinson is absolutely hilarious. I Think You Should Leave is basically a perfect sketch comedy show in my opinion. And yet his history on SNL is basically non-existent. Because sometimes SNL just wants to play the safe pedestrian comedy to their main audience, which doesn't leave a lot of room for writers and performers who have a more eccentric or absurd humor style. And that is absolutely the case with Tim Robinson. I feel like he was very much limited in what he could do on the show. And that isn't to say he didn't have any good moments on the show. He was in a couple sketches that I still go back and watch to this day. My personal favorite is when he and Jason Sudeikis are pitching the new theme song for NBA on NBC and reveal that the iconic song Round Ball Rock actually started with lyrics.
Basketball, gimme the ball because I'm gonna dunk it!
I also love him mercilessly breaking Kevin Hart, giving 150% for what is essentially a throwaway character. So he had a couple of memorable sketches on the show, but SNL just wasn't the right showcase for his type of humor. I think Tim Robinson's comedy stylings shine when you're not racing against the clock on a live show, or you're not looking to get a laugh on every single line. And that's why I Think You Should Leave is a perfect show. John Milheiser was one of 6 new featured players that SNL brought on for season 39. Of the 6 new players, only 2 of them would last past their first season, that being Beck Bennett and Kyle Mooney. The other 4 all seemingly struggled to find their place on the show, and John Milheiser is no exception. He was very sparingly used this season, especially compared to the other 5 new cast members, so he hardly had a moment to shine. I think the sketch he's most remembered for is one that he wrote and starred in with Lady Gaga, where the 2 of them play over-enthusiastic parents watching their child's talent show performance. And it is truly a tour de force of physical comedy. He and Lady Gaga commit to the bit so hard. Ashley! But that was the last big role he was given on the show, and that was only in episode 6 of the season. For the rest of the season, he was almost exclusively seen in the background of sketches with little to no speaking parts, and was just never able to break out of this giant cast. Mike O'Brien, I would argue, was the strongest addition to the cast of the 4 who were let go at the end of the season, or at least he brought the most unique voice to his writing. I don't think he was the strongest live sketch performer, although he did very much shine when he was playing the cringy loser male rights activist, which I know does not sound like a compliment, but I assure you it is.
Bruce, you fight against equal pay for men and women.
I fight for the right to be paid more if you're a man.
But the short films that he contributed to the show were always a highlight. Most of which, I should point out, did not air during season 39. You see, while he was not brought back as a cast member in season 40, he did stay on as a writer, and Lorne Michaels allowed him to keep making short films for the show. So it almost feels like he got more screen time when he wasn't a cast member. I highly recommend checking out Grow a Guy and the Jay-Z Story, 2 sketches I will not talk about in detail as to not spoil first-time watchers. So overall, while his time at SNL was short, or at least his time as a performer, I always appreciate when someone can bring a new voice to the table, and I very much feel like his short films did that. Noel Wells was the only female featured player to be added this year for season 39. She was already known for her impression skills outside of the show, so it's no surprise that most of her screen time came from celebrity impressions ranging from Lena Dunham to Lena Dunham's character in Girls. But I feel like she kind of fell into the trap that so many good impressionists fall into on the show, which is the writers don't know how else to use them. So whenever she's not doing an impression, she's relegated to the role of girl number 3 in every other sketch. Unlike the previous 2 cast members, it doesn't seem like Noel Wells was ever given a specific moment to shine, because even when she was doing celebrity impressions, it was within a sketch that was full of other cast members doing dozens of celebrity impressions. I don't think anyone was shocked when they did not invite her back for season 40, because it was clear the show did not know how to utilize her, which is a shame, but that's show business. Brooks Wheelan is the final of the season 39 one-timers, and unlike the rest of the new additions, he came from a primarily stand-up background. And whenever the show brings on a stand-up comic, it's very likely that they're going to feel most comfortable behind the desk on Weekend Update, which is exactly where Brooks appeared a few times, meaning he was the only of these 4 cast members to ever appear on Weekend Update. His update features were mainly modified stand-up routines that I'm sure he pulled from his existing material. They were standard, but they were pretty funny. But as a sketch actor, the show used him as a glorified extra. I honestly don't think there's another cast member that has showed up in so many other sketches with 0 lines. Like, he's genuinely either there to fill space or to play a celebrity that they don't trust him enough to pull off, so they stand there silently. His stand-up career seems to be going quite well ever since he left the show, touring with the likes of Seth Meyers and John Oliver, so I think he's just fine. And also, when he was fired, he tweeted out the iconic phrase, "Fired from New York, it's Saturday night," which you just gotta respect. Jon Rudnitsky was the sole cast member added for the show's 41st season, and I think he described his tenure best.
Well, you're not a regular guy. I mean, you're on SNL.
Literally nobody knows that, Colin.
His biggest breakout moment on the show came from the 12th episode, where he had a Weekend Update piece about the film Dirty Dancing, and it is honestly like nothing I have ever seen on the show before. I don't know if I've ever seen another Weekend Update piece that is almost entirely pantomimed, and I found myself grinning like an idiot the entire time. But for the rest of the season, he was largely absent from sketches, including sketches he was supposed to be in. One of the most notable moments in his short tenure, and one that he partially attributes to him being fired, was his presence in a sketch called Mafia Meeting, more commonly known as Space Pants. Space Pants! In it, he plays a relatively small role of a gangster sitting next to Pete Davidson, but when the sketch starts, there is a noticeable empty seat at the table, and Pete Davidson very shakily and nervously delivers his lines, probably because he was reading Rudnitsky's lines because he was not there. When the camera cuts to Bobby Moynihan, you can hear Rudnitsky running onto the set in the background to sit down, and Bobby plays it off masterfully, ad-libbing the line.
You're making me look bad. All right, where are you? Look, we'll have it by tomorrow, okay? I promise, all right?
So it's nothing that truly derailed the sketch, but a major screw-up like that, along with very little screen time, probably led to his ousting at the end of the season. Luke Knoll was added as a featured player for season 43. He only really had 2 notable live sketches during his time on the show, one that he wrote with fellow cast member Heidi Gardner, where he consults with his doctor about getting his horns removed.
It'll just be nice to have a flat forehead again. It's been so long since I slept in my face.
And another where he plays a student showing up late for class and then showing off by personally insulting every single classmate. As a side note, none of the specific insults are necessarily looking for a laugh. They're all just a setup for the second half of this sketch, which means Luke Knoll had to go out there and basically bomb on purpose on national television.
It's the janitor. Question, is the first thing your wife says when you get home, you smell or you smell terrible? I'm kidding with you.
Luke actually discussed this moment in a Reddit AMA a few years back, and he said, "In dress rehearsal, it came right after update, so the audience had just seen me and was introduced to me. This made the sketch go over much better in dress rehearsal." As you know, it's a time bomb of a sketch, as Mikey described it. It's me being a racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic asshole, and then becomes funny when Keenan tears me apart, right? Only in the live show, there was no update piece that got to actually introduce me as myself first. This 2 minutes of me intentionally bombing was the first time people were really going to see me. But funny enough, I would argue his shining moment from his 1-season tenure came from a sketch that never actually aired. Luke Knoll plays John Mulaney's best man, and he has written a song for their wedding reception, and you slowly find out throughout the course of the song that he is having an affair with the bride and Jack White. Luke has such a good singing voice and absolutely nails this sketch, so it's really a shame the live audience never got to see him shine like this. Lauren Holt was added to the cast alongside Andrew Dismukes and Punky Johnson when the show returned to the studio after the pandemic. There's truly not much to say about her run, as I believe she only had a single standout moment during this season, a singular weekend update piece playing a relationship expert who just got dumped right before Valentine's Day.
Kenzie, you got some makeup under your eyes.
Oh, yeah. It's highlighter. It's Rihanna's brand. On the replay.
Besides that update piece, she was very rarely seen this season, let alone given speaking roles. I counted 3 impressions she did on the show that involved 0 talking, including Jenna Ellis, Karen Pence, and Roseanne Barr. She was quietly dropped from the cast after the season, but she has gone on to book a role in the upcoming HBO sitcom I Love LA, so keep an eye out for that. Aristotle Athari joined the show alongside James Austin Johnson and Sarah Sherman, 2 cast members who have become mainstays in the current era of SNL, so he definitely had an uphill battle to make a mark on the show. And he definitely didn't have a bad showing for a first-season cast member. In fact, he came up with 2 original characters that made it onto the show, my favorite being Angelo. He's a surrealist musician who can come up with a song based on any audience member's single-word suggestion.
Bicycle.
But every song sounds exactly the same.
If I ever say that man to me like this tonight. Thank you for this.
They attempted to do that sketch at least 2 more times with diminishing returns, unable to capture the spark of the first one, so both of those sketches were cut for time. He also had a weekend update character called Laughintosh 3000, a robotic comedian who is just not cut out for this business.
Staten Island. Processing? Processing? Staten Island sucks!
Both of those characters were pieces that he had come up with outside of SNL and performed in 2019 at the Just for Laughs festival. If you look around online, you can find videos of his performance there, and it's really interesting to see how those characters evolved in the years leading up to SNL. On the few occasions that he was given a speaking role in a live sketch, I thought he always hit it out of the park. His delivery as an apartment tenant always got a laugh out of me. I was honestly a little surprised when he was cut at the end of the season, because while he may have not had the same amount of screen time as the other featured players, I thought he made the most out of what he was given and brought a lot of fun content to the table. Speaking of unjustly fired cast members, Chloe Trost was a cast member for season 49 after originally being passed over as a cast member for season 48. Besides being a good actor and a funny comedian, Chloe Trost might be one of the best singers the show has ever had. Whenever she was given a chance to sing in a sketch, I was just blown away with how good she was. Her true breakout performance was as Little Orphan Cassidy, a girl who is very sad after being passed up for adoption yet again, but for good reason.
So what? I bit a girl last week straight down to the bone. And yeah, I have $600,000 in student loans.
You went to college?
Yes.
And I do want to take a moment to point out what I believe is unfair criticism towards her. Chloe Trost had the honor of starring in what is possibly the worst cold open in the show's 51-year history. I had to rewatch it while writing this. It was somehow worse than I remember. The thing is, at dress rehearsal for the show mere hours earlier, the role of Elise Stefanik was not played by Chloe Trost, but former cast member Cecily Strong, marking her first cameo on the show since her departure. But after the sketch presumably bombed at dress rehearsal and she realized just how bad it was going to be, she dropped out with less than an hour until showtime, and Chloe Trost was asked to go into the role with zero rehearsal. So it was in no way her fault that she was in a terrible sketch. She had no say in the matter. Okay, angry rant aside, I thought she had a really strong season for a first cast member, and I was really excited to see her continue to grow. So myself and so many others were shocked when it was announced that she was not coming back for season 50. And in a statement released online, she made it abundantly clear that it was not her choice. Since then, there have been tons of rumors and speculation regarding her departure from the show, none of which have any evidence, so I'm not going to just spread around baseless accusations here. So all I can say is, boy, do I wish she was given more time on the show, because I felt like she could have grown into a very solid repertory player. The final cast member on our list as of 2025 is Emil Wakim, who was on the show for season 50. And I gotta say, if you're gonna be a single season cast member, season 50 is a pretty good one to join in on. Emil had 2 prominent Weekend Update features of modified stand-up material, both of which played very hot with the live audience. And even when a joke didn't land, he recovered masterfully.
Like, that's how we got there, you know? Colin wrote that joke for me.
And even though he didn't have the most screen time last season, I always thought he did a very good job in whatever he was given, and it was just a solid addition to the show. I was honestly surprised Emil was let go at the end of the season, especially when those with comparable screen time like Jane Wickline were kept on. I know there's been some discourse online saying the only reason he was let go is because he spoke up about Palestine on the show. I personally don't believe this to be the case, because his update piece about Gaza was done at dress rehearsal and was then chosen by all the higher-ups to be in the live show. So it's not like they were blindsided by anything he said. In fact, you could argue that they wanted his words to be seen by a wider audience. His time in the show was cut way too short, in my opinion, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. And that, my friend, is all 57 single-season cast members from SNL. Is anybody even watching this video anymore? Like I mentioned before, 5 new cast members were brought on for season 51. Will any of them be single-season cast members? It's too early to tell. But what I will say is, if any of those 5 players get the boot after the season is over, they're in good company. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and thank you so much to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the E7 standing desk by clicking the link in the description below. And a big thank you to all you members. I appreciate you guys having my back and supporting this crazy content I make over here. If there are any other videos or topics you want to see me cover on this channel, please let me know in the comments below. But until then, be kind to one another, stay safe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.